Hi, my name is Amanda Eckert, and I'm 2012 Colorado Core. I am applying for the MTLD position, and I will be doing a video response to the questions for the application. So I'm going to read them and then answer them. So, yes, I am currently still teaching. I teach lower elementary special education in a Denver public school. My big aspirations for my students and what I really want my students to take away with them are two things: urgency and advocacy. And advocacy has always been something that I strive for my students ever since my first year in Teach for America. Um, Understanding special education and understanding students who have exceptional learning disabilities is that there's this lack of their voice. They feel very insecure in the classroom. Their confidence is really low, and they don't know what they need to be successful. And then on top of that, they don't know how to ask for it. So, in all of my years of teaching, I've always focus on my students' advocacy. And I felt like this year in particular, with what's happening politically, it's been even stronger than now. We talk about what's happening with all of the presidential candidates and what does advocacy mean in those ideas. And I really try to instill this idea for my students to understand that if you're not going to ask for something, if you're not going to raise your voice up and say what you need, nothing's going to happen. And you need to do that. You need to have that powerful voice because you are a powerful individual. And I really strive for my students to then apply those senses of I'm powerful, I know what I need to be successful, and then bring that into their classroom because it's great with me, but then I need to see it over in their classrooms. And yeah, it has been really successful. We keep tally marks of how many times they're doing things independently of me, slash how many times they're advocating it. And I keep tally marks, 100% marks each class. So when I see 100% of us, advocating, or 100% of us meeting my expectation, they get tally marks. So if I see a kid advocate, which is one of my expectations, I say, thank you, Leo. Like you advocated, like you earned the entire group 100% point, which is awesome. And then my second fault is urgency. And especially now more than any other time in my teaching career have I felt this need to let my students know the urgency of becoming stronger readers, becoming stronger mathematicians, and why it's so important. Working in a low economic school that is very racially diverse, I'm faced with kids constantly, not taking their education as seriously because of a ton of other factors that's affecting them, which I understand and respect. But what I tell them is, I'm like, this stuff is so important. This is your job to be in school, because if we don't get to where you need to be yet, then what's going to happen when you're out in the real world? What's going to happen when you want to start applying for jobs? What starts making you stronger and making you academically, emotionally ready for the rest of your life starts right here in elementary school. And that type of urgency I always want my kids to have, because I need them to know that what we're doing is so important for the rest of their life, and especially at a young age, that's really hard for them to instill. So we're still working on that sense of urgency. I still am expecting holding my students to really high behavior expectations. And I think my students have become a lot more urgent. In the beginning of the year, I had many students that were taking our reading as a joke, or, were behaviorally not present and with us. But then I provide a lot of positive supports and a lot of conversations and relationship buildings, and I significantly improved in my groups, and then that also significantly helps them improve academically. And what measurable goals do I set for my students' learning? And how do I decide on them? So, what's thankful for a special education teacher is that we have measurable goals already because of IEP goals. And most of my students this year, I had last year. So, I know what their goals are and I set them based off of where they are and where they need to be. And thinking about both realistic goals and then exceptional goals. Like, what would be the best thing that I would want them to be? So I always set my students' goal, let's say in reading, by a year and a half, and I decide that based off of in the beginning of the year doing a lot of core diagnostics, seeing where students' breakdowns are, and then being like, okay, this is where we're going to focus on phonics. This is where we're going to focus on sight words. And that's how I decide where their measurable goals are. So I'm like, if Emmanuel needs to be at a third grade level and he's at a middle of kindergarten level, then he needs to be at a beginning of second grade level by the end of the year. And then I really then hone in on small achievable goals. And they track these small achievable goals like oral reading fluency at their level. They track where they're going. And right now, all of my kids are on the path of reaching that year and a half growth, which is amazing. What are my biggest reflections on how you could have improved upon the year of teaching? A lot of things. I think we always start off the year wishing that we had known previously what we do know now. My biggest thing from this year is my own professional understanding and development around interventions and around intervention curriculum. And there was a lack of intervention curriculum at my school, and what I was seeing is that I was using this stuff that I would create for students at their level to help them grow, to help them fill in gaps. But it wasn't as systematic, it wasn't as rigorous, as accepted by the CDE, Colorado Department of Education, as it should be. And as I slowly developed through conversations with my network support partner, with other special education teachers, doing a ton of research, participating in multiple intervention curriculum things. Now I know is what interventions curriculums would be beneficial to have implemented at the beginning of the year that we're now starting to implement in the middle of the year. That being said, in the beginning of the year, there was still the interventions I was putting in place at that level. But now what we're realizing is, oh, well, my kids are still struggling with this, but this intervention curriculum we're using isn't meeting their needs. What other intervention curriculums are provided to us that we could get in order to best support our students? What grades and or subjects are you currently teaching? Again, I'm teaching early elementary special education. So K first, second, third. What are your aspirations and measurable goals for this year? How do you decide on them? If you change anything from last year's aspiration measurable goals, what and why? So my biggest aspiration from this year, as opposed to last year, is parent and community involvement. And this was always something that you get so overwhelmed by school and so overwhelmed by paperwork. I consistently felt like I was lacking that relationship with parents. And last year, my biggest goal was rigor, which being a special education teacher, I also struggled with because I was like, I want to provide rigor, but how do I provide rigor for kids who are just needing to know their letters, needing to know letter sounds? And they changed because I felt like I'd become really good at rigor because at the beginning of the year, I just thought rigor was harder work, or last year, and I feel like that's always a misunderstanding when in reality, rigor is providing with supports challenges for your students, taking what they're learning and going beyond. So last year I did a lot of math where we would do real life math ideas at their level. So maybe it's double digit math, but we would go and we would read through magazines and see if they could buy different stuff in magazines, and then they had $100 and we had to figure out change. This year, my aspiration and goal is for more community and parent involvement. And I'm doing really good on this front, which I will talk about in a question to follow. Number 7, what do you decide what to teach on any given day, week, month? In other words, what is your planning process? So good teaching is backward planning. And so I have a lot of information on my students. Both their IEP goals help me know where they need to be within a year by their IEP goals. And then on top of that, in the beginning of the year, I do a lot of diagnostics, a lot of screeners, which tells me where my students' breakdowns are, because I want to fill in the holes rather than pave over them, which is what happens a lot in school. So in the beginning of the year, I know exactly where my students are. Maybe they need to work on letter sounds. Maybe they need to work on CBC words. So that's what I know in the long run. So that's how I started. And then I go on a bi-weekly progress monitoring that's at their instructional level using a curriculum-based measurement, AIMS-Web. And that helps me then decide next week what I need to work on. So let's say I'm progress monitoring them on an oral reading fluency on a first grade level, and I'm seeing vowel digraphs they just don't know them. Then I know next week we're going to add some vowel digraphs on top of using the intervention curriculum that I am currently using. Because the intervention curriculum I am using is very systematic at ability level that definitely built on top of each other, so that the kids are really building up their skills week to week. And then on top of that, I'm like, where can we add even more instruction at what they need? So we do like a warm up on vowel digraphs where they read words with the vowel digraphs in it. Let's see. How and when do you track progress towards your goals? How do you use this information for your tracking? Progress monitoring is my best friend in the world, and I use AIMS-Web, which is an online special education progress monitoring resource that provides a variety of different probes to meet different early literacy, early numeracy, oral reading fluency, math concepts, and math computation. So it provides a variety of different progress monitoring tools that you can use based off of what the students need and based off of where the students are. So once I have that, I then progress monitor them every 2 weeks. So then I see if they're growing, and if they're not growing, then I come back and I'm like, okay, if they're not growing, then what do we need to work on? I realized recently, based off of my progress monitoring during my oral reading fluency, that my 3rd grade group needed significantly more attention to sight words at a kindergarten level. So what I started to do then is provide a warm-up where students would read, see how many sight words they could read in a minute, and then track their progress based off of that. And then every day the words like scramble, so they're not just memorizing it. So the progress monitoring tool 100% helps me decide on what I need to still teach my kids and how much growth they have that I can celebrate with them. How do you ensure that your assessments are both rigorous and aligned to your goals and plans? I think, again, what I said before, rigor can be misinterpreted as just harder or like more problems. And in reality, what I find is that with kids who are in special education, rigor is sometimes stuff on their level. Rigor is sometimes word problems that they need to visualize in their head. So my assessments are really based off of where they are and then pushing them even further for them. And they're aligned to my goals and to my plans because I know exactly what my students' goals are. I know exactly when they need to reach those goals. And what the AIMS-Web does is they say, these are the breakdowns that your kids need to get to here, and these are the scores that they need to get to here. So then I can use that and push them forward to get to their goal. Where are your students currently against the aspirations and measurable goals you set for this year? What specifically are the results so far? So what I said before, what I said earlier is that my students have made a ton of progress academically and socially, emotionally. We all of my third grade students have grown a year so far, so we're still pushing them forward for that year and a half. All of my second grade students have made almost 3/4 of a year's growth in their reading. In their math, they're closing the gap, but only one subject I'm going to focus on. My kindergarten students are closing the gap significantly since Colorado doesn't require kindergarten. A lot of kindergarten students come not knowing letter sounds, letter names. All of my students know their letter sounds. All of my students know their letter names, and now they're applying reading, which is so awesome to see. So they have significantly closed the gap in those early stages. How do you engage with the community in which you teach? So this again was my goal for this year. And I've done a lot of things this year really focused on community building and parent relationship. There's a variety of different things I did. I'm lucky enough to have my school participate in parent-teacher home visits, which a lot of schools in Denver public schools don't participate in. But I have now, for the first time ever, gone to every single one of my students' homes and had a parent-teacher visit with my students where they showed me their rooms, and I talked to their parents, and I was able to talk to them about what their goals are for their students, talk about the amazing kids that they are, and just start building that relationship with them, that it's not just so teacher parent, it's like we're all in this together as a community, which has been so awesome. I also participate in a lot of various clubs in my school. I'm on the equity team. I do student council. I participate in the Shakespeare, and I think having the kids having myself be involved a lot more in kids that I don't necessarily work with in special education, or in the same grade level, has allowed me to become a lot more known around the school, a lot more comfortable talking with parents. I know a lot more parents now. I don't have this role, but I took it upon myself to be the morning greeter and to stand outside so I could greet kids in the morning and talk to their parents. So then the parents started putting a name to a face. And something awesome that I've really been trying to do this year is work on my Spanish, because the population of my school currently is about 50% Black, 50% Hispanic, and the Hispanic students, a good majority of them are native Spanish speakers, so their parents speak Spanish only. So I've learned a new Spanish intervention curriculum, so I could start teaching our students in special education who are native Spanish speaker. I can start instructing them in their native language, and I think the parents, I've been trying to work with different teachers at my school who are Spanish speaking to help me learn some more Spanish, and then so I can be a little bit more in communication with parents. And I think what I've noticed is that the parents of my students who are ILA, they've just, I think, really appreciated that. And we interact more, we hug more. Even if the language barrier is still there at times, they help me out so much with my Spanish, but I think it's just the thought and the trying that they've really appreciated. And the last question, what was your most entrepreneurial moment in the past couple of years, meaning the instance where you took initiative to do something that hasn't been done before, where you were making new ground? Why do you consider this to be entrepreneurial? What happened as a result? So I'm actually going to take a very different turn from this, and I'm going to talk about something that I initiated that I felt was groundbreaking, not so much as a student level, but as a teacher level. The school that I work in is very challenging. We have a lot of adversity and a lot of students who have really challenging lives, and that plays out in school. And it can be really hard for teachers. And obviously, in any school, teaching's very, very hard. And in a school where you're constantly being faced with kids who have so much trauma, um, and not the tools to regulate it, that it can take a lot of on your toll. And as a person who really, as I think I embody the DPS core value of fun the most. I was thinking, I was seeing all of my coworkers and my peers just at the end of the day being so defeated and so sad and so negative. As a personal positive person, that was weighing on me a lot too. And I felt like just the overall staff culture at my school was really starting to deteriorate. And that concerned me because if you're not at your best, you're not at your best for your students. So what I decided to do was I decided to try to create a system where there was more teacher recognition during our staff meetings. So I talked to my equity team and I talked to our administration, and I created these awards. There's like a wand, just fun little awards, a wand, like a flower for planting the seed, a wand for your magical, a plastic bat for coming up to bat. And these became our new staff recognition awards so that we could start shouting out our peers more, because that was something that was lacking. We would go to these staff meetings and we weren't doing shout outs, we weren't doing any type of recognition. And we don't need the recognition as teachers because it's a very selfless occupation, but it feels really nice, and it starts to lift you up a little bit more. And what I was seeing after doing this is that the overall staff culture just kept on going up, and people were having fun with the awards, and people were showing the awards around to their kids, and like it was like a sense of pride. And I felt like this was very like groundbreaking because we put so much focus into our kids, which absolutely we need to do, but then that takes away focus for ourselves, and then we become depleted and we become not as emotionally stable and physically stable to be the best for our kids. And I know personally, and I know across the board, if you're happy, it makes a huge difference for your kids. You're able to be more patient. You're able to be more understanding, take more time, and have more fun. Because teaching doesn't have to be this thing that breaks you down some days. And I felt like that was something that like really helped to increase the overall culture in my school, which I think we desperately needed. So that is my entrepreneurial moment. And I am Amanda Eckert. Thank you for watching.